Welcome to the Voice of Retail Special CommerceNext Bonus Episode, Part 1. I'm your host, Michael LeBlanc. This podcast is brought to you in conjunction with the Retail Council of Canada. On this episode, I talked to CommerceNext founder Scott Silverman and Veronika Sonsev about the genesis of the CommerceNext Thought Leadership event and community, its overarching objectives, and about the virtual summit July 28th, 29th, 2020. Next, Rob Schmults, Executive Board, Midocean Partners, and Laura Joukovski, President, Global Fashion Brands, Techstyle Fashion Group, both return to the podcast and give me 2 starts and 1 stop pieces of advice for retailers based on their experience and expectations of the COVID-19 era. So first, let's hear from Scott and Veronika. Scott, Veronika, welcome to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you both doing?
Good,
Great.
thank you.
Thank you for having us.
Well, we're recording this on a rainy Friday in your part of the world, but it's a sunny day in Toronto. I suspect that's going to reverse itself very shortly, so thanks for the heads up on that. Listen, it's great to talk to both of you. Scott, you and I have known each other, and I'm going to throw out a big number. We've known each other more than 20 years. Veronika, you and I have yet to meet, so I have the pleasure of getting to know you a bit better on the podcast. But we wanted to set this bonus episode and the next bonus episode kind of talking about the great lineup you've got for CommerceNext. But I wanted to delve into a little bit more of the event itself and its genesis and all that great stuff. Scott, why don't you tell the listeners who may not know of you a little bit about yourself, and then Veronika will ask you to do the same thing.
Yeah, we have known each other for a long time. I've gained a much bigger forehead and many gray hairs over that time. But I have been in the retail and e-commerce space back to 1999. I was the executive director of Shop.org, which was the digital division of the National Retail Federation. There, I cut my teeth on bringing e-commerce leaders together for information sharing, learning, and networking. I made a lot of relationships with folks that I've watched grow in the industry and move into progressively more senior and leadership roles. And my little claim to fame is I am the co-inventor of Cyber Monday. So anyone that is frustrated by the influx of shopping and customer service and all that stuff, they have me to blame.
Well, it's funny because my claim to fame is I know the guy who has the claim to fame. So thank you for that second degree of connection. Veronika, tell me about yourself. What's your background, and then how did you two meet and get together?
Michael, thank you for having me. It's so nice to meet you today, and hopefully in person soon. So I am one of the co-founders of CommerceNext. I'm also a partner at Chameleon Collective, and I've been working in the retail industry a little less than Scott. It's been the last 10 years. I got into retail through a different channel. I was actually founded a tech company called InSpark, which worked with some of the largest retailers in the world. And before that, my career was leading business development for media companies. So it's been an interesting journey. I kind of have seen things from all sides, and actually met Scott while I was working on InSpark through my business partner, Richie Hecker. So we met then. We then got to work on another event together. And through that kind of came CommerceNext, and the rest is history.
Well, Scott, tell us about the genesis of CommerceNext. Developed a great brand in a relatively short amount of time, and a community, and it's an event. And tell me about the overarching objectives and how this, as I said, the genesis of this event came together.
Well, we saw some white space in the industry. We saw that there were big ecosystem conferences like Shop Talk and NRF. And then there were some niche conferences that looked at some customer acquisition strategies like search engine strategies or ad exchanger conferences. But we knew that there was this huge audience of digital retail executives and marketers that wanted to get together and talk about customer acquisition and growth for retail. And that was why we decided to put it together to begin with. It's now going into its 3rd or 4th year. We were, a very in-person event-focused organization up until this year when COVID pushed us into the virtual world. But we're planning to have our actual annual summit at the end of this month on July 28th and 29th, the same days as the virtual summit, with 1,200 people. And, we're working on a great roster of speakers and topics and so on. And during the other, times of the year, we put together things like dinners around the country on a regional basis. We have networking gatherings at other conferences like NRF and Shop Talk. And everything we do is around bringing these e-commerce leaders, these digital retail leaders together to learn, network, and share information with one another.
It's really it's an extension of the quest that you've been on. Your life's work basically is bring people together, smart people together to just learn together, and whether that's over a great dinner or whether that's in a formal conference setting, right? I mean, it really feels like this ecosystem that you've built that isn't just one event, but it's an overall approach. Yeah.
And Michael, I just wanted to add on to kind of what Scott said. I think there's the other kind of reason for CommerceNext and why it's taken off, I think, fairly rapidly is also just because marketing is one of the biggest budget items for a retail or e-commerce company. And at the same time, we find that what it takes to acquire customers changes so much because the platforms change, the technology changes, tactics that work one year don't work the next. So it's just so obvious that you want to get the community together to share and learn from each other. So it's a continuation kind of from Scott's heritage of getting folks together to learn, but also really filling this white space in an area that is so, I don't want to say volatile, but that changes so quickly.
Dynamic, right?
Dynamic. That's a much better term. Yeah, that's so dynamic. And so giving the community an opportunity to learn from each other is just an obvious place to be.
Well, Veronika, let's pick up on that thread, talk about dynamic and change and disruption. This year is certainly disrupted from many perspectives, not the least of which, unfortunately, is conferences. So, as Scott alluded to, and as we're talking about today, you've created now a virtual summit. So, tell me about it. Tell me how it's going to run, and who's going to be there, and what the objectives are, and how you've thought about taking the best that you can do and moving it online and try to replicate at least some of that. There's certainly lots of the thought leadership and knowledge sharing and maybe a bit of networking. So tell me about what folks can expect on the 28th, 29th of July.
Sure, Michael. We actually think that this CommerceNext Virtual Summit is one of the most important events that we've held so far, partially because of the critical time in our industry. So the theme of the virtual summit is Path to Recovery. And our goal is to showcase leaders who've navigated through this COVID-19 pandemic and really have them share best practices so that the industry can learn from what they did right, from their lessons, and really help the industry figure out their path out of this. We've seen more bankruptcies in such a short period of time than we ever have in this industry. Yeah. We've had stores closed for extensive periods of time. E-commerce.
Muji today announced in the U.S., right?
Muji today, Sur La Table yesterday. It's like one after another, right?
Brooks Brothers earlier in the week, and goodness.
It's crazy. But at the same time, like e-commerce has advanced, at least 5 years. Some people say 10 years. The adoption is tremendous. So there's all these things happening. I don't think we've ever had an acceleration of digital at the same time as this kind of decline in physical ever before. And so we wanted to get everyone together to really help them learn. And we'll be covering topics like what is the new normal in retail and e-commerce? What does the post-pandemic consumer look like? We're going to talk to industry leaders like Gail Tifford, who's the chief brand officer at WW, about how they created community engagement in a digital first world, especially given how analog they were before with in-person meetings. We have, questions like, is advertising diversification still needed? With leaders like Emily Boschwitz from Hims Hers and Webb Smith from 2PM. It's really going to be a great show.
Well, I'm looking forward to it. And Scott, give us a bit of information about how people can learn and register, where they can learn more about registering and participating.
Yeah, if you go to commercenext.com/virtual-summit, you can see the information about the agenda and speakers and register there. We are on Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn. We're pretty prolific about updating on LinkedIn, sometimes maybe too much, but you can follow us there, and we'll constantly be including links where you can sign up and register for this 2-day event. If I could, I just wanted to add one other thing about the way we're approaching this virtual summit. And in addition to everything that Veronika was saying, we've also been really stepping up our research. So we have always been doing an annual study that was going into its second year. We had to update that because we originally went into the field before COVID. So we had to re-ask a number of questions. And we're going to be releasing that next week. We also have been doing, we started on every other week and then moved to every other month in partnership with Sucharita Kadali at Forrester.
Been a guest on the podcast several times. Great guest on the podcast.
Yeah, she's terrific. And it's a pulse check on what's happening with e-commerce in light of COVID. We have some recurring questions about revenue trends and so on. And then we have a way to tap into the voice of consumers through a partnership with BizRate Insights, where we've been able to collect a lot of information about how consumer shopping is changing, what they're looking for, what they're trying to overcome, and so on. And we've been incorporating all of this into our content, whether it's on our webinars. There's going to be a lot of it incorporated into the virtual summit as well.
Now, is it the case that the folks participating in the summit get to interact in some way? Is there Q&A? Is there? Tell me a little bit about that, just the functional element during those 2 days.
We've been building community as part of our virtual events since the beginning of March, and we are very good about encouraging participants to ask questions. We try to loop in participants' questions as part of the sessions so that they feel involved. And the questions come in through text, but we ask them through our moderators. But the other cool thing that we're doing as part of the CommerceNext Virtual Summit is we're hosting a happy hour. So this is an experiment for us. We're sending everyone attending 2 bottles of House, and we're going to break people up into breakout rooms and create a virtual happy hour for people to network and talk about what they saw during the show. So we have a little bit of twist in terms of how we're getting people together and interacting.
Well, congratulations to both of you on your pivot. I'll be there for sure and looking forward to it. And of course, I was looking forward to seeing you both in person, but we'll wait for that for another day. Next best thing, seeing you virtually and participating. So thanks for joining me today on the Voice of Retail, and best of luck with the next couple of weeks, which are always hectic in advance of an event. And I wish you a great rest of your day.
Thank you again for having us.
Thank you for having us, Michael.
Rob, welcome back to the Voice of Retail. How are you?
I am well. Thank you for having me back.
Well, the last time you and I spoke was such a fun interview. It was on the sidewalks in New York outside a whiskey bar during NRF. We had all kinds of fun interruptions, and we had a lengthy interview. So I wanted to give that shout out to the listeners to be sure and click back a couple of episodes back to late January, early February to hear a longer interview with you. But for this format, for our friends, the special episode for our friends at CommerceNext, give us a brief, who are you, a bit of a background, and your current role.
Name is Rob Schmults. I play an operating role with Midocean Partners, which is a private equity firm. And there I help the portfolio companies with kind of all things digital, data, et cetera, as well as provide some support for when the firm is looking at potential investments and helping understand both what the digital capabilities might be, as well as where there might be opportunity. So that's been really interesting. Get to work with a lot of great people and look at a lot of interesting companies. So that's been a lot of fun. How I got there, because that's not the world I come from. I'm not an investment professional or had sort of banking or anything like that in my past. For 25 years, I've had a variety of leadership roles, both inside of retailers and brands, again, in and around digital, e-commerce, online marketing, loyalty, analytics, payments, et cetera, what have you. But also spent a chunk of that time on the solution provider side, helping those same types of companies, but from the outside. So that's been certainly for me personally, a very rewarding mix and interesting way to kind of have developed my point of view on the industry and what have you over the past couple decades now.
Well, I described you in our first episode as a triple threat because you've both been an operator, you've been on the vendor side working with retailers, and now you're on the private equity side. So you see all these three angles. So that leads us into this question, so based on the observations, things you've learned in the business so far in the COVID era, and what you anticipate retail will look like in the COVID era and beyond, give me 2 starts and 1 stop advice for the retailers and retail industry insiders listening to our conversation.
Great, and I love that construct. And a couple of them will be sort of COVID related, but one at least I would have given you even before COVID. So one start that I think COVID may have given us a bit of an opportunity, as odd as that may sound, is, I think companies should start taking a fresh look at what organizational barriers and internal resistance just went away. So it makes sense that we're all looking at how the consumer has sort of leapt forward and adoption rates have climbed and all that kind of stuff. But I think you may find, many of your listeners probably are directly experiencing this, but if not, they should go seek it out. There are going to be places, programs, opportunities, things that your company maybe had thought about doing or said, oh, we never would do that, for any number of reasons, where COVID just helped you get out of your own way because the internal attitudes and levels of awareness around all things digital just shifted radically inside of companies as well as outside. So one brief example of where you might see this, and certainly I think many of us have seen this on the receiving end, is views of content, in particular video type content. My experience has always been companies have been very reticent to invest in things like how-to content and user-generated videos that they might pull into their own digital experience, et cetera, because there was this innate desire to have it be Super Bowl quality. And well, we can't do a video. That's a 6 month, and we got to fly to Ibiza, and it's all this kind of stuff. And I think what happened was with COVID, all of a sudden it was like we need to get some stuff up to communicate to our customers, whether it's to how to be safe or how to shop with us or how to use our product when they couldn't interact with people in a physical environment, et cetera. And what these companies found is, wow, we kind of rushed that video out. It's not like perfect sound quality. It's not perfect image. We don't have the perfect models, et cetera. But hey, everyone seems to really like it. We're getting a lot of adoption of it. So,
Michael Bay Michael Bay happened to not be available for the port, and yet it still worked out.
Right. So, and I don't want to get hung up on the example, but I think the example illustrates this broader point that you may find internal barriers to doing things went down. I was actually just before getting on this podcast with you, I was talking with an industry friend who you know well, and he mentioned a certain large retailer that had been talking for years about doing curbside pickup, and always were like, and they rolled it out in 48 hours, and I think it's very, he says there's no way they're going to roll it back. So all the things that they had put in their own way, they blew up and now they're doing it. So look for those opportunities. All right. I'll try to be a little less long-winded on this, on my second start. And this one is an example of a thing to start doing that I would have told you 6 months ago as well as now. And that's take a fresh look at your incumbent tools and providers. In other words, the stuff you already have in place. So we work in an industry that's, almost trained to always be looking for the new thing. And what new thing can we roll out? And, I talked to this company and they promised me, 5% more sales, and who doesn't want that, et cetera, et cetera. Well, meanwhile, you spent a lot of time and money installing Solution X and System Y and Platform Z, and those same promises were made to you. And I think oftentimes when those promises don't always come to fruition, it's oftentimes as much the client side, in other words, the retailer or brand side, fault in quotes as anyone else, because of that bias of always jumping to the next project. And so I just encourage listeners to go back and look at their installed tools, capabilities, the solution providers they already have signed up and integrated, and not just say, hey, are we using this to its fullest advantage? In other words, do my internal teams actually know how to get the full yield out of this? Are they doing what they need to do? Am I giving them the time and bandwidth to leverage the tool, to access the reporting that's built into it, to figure out how to do better, all that kind of stuff? And then also, have we been keeping up with that solution provider's evolution as well? And sometimes on that latter point, what can be very helpful, I've found, is to ask them to come back in and quote unquote resell you. So pretend I don't have it installed, come in and pitch me on it. And then I'll be able to figure out like, oh, I never configured that setting, or geez, we don't even use that, or we don't actually access that report that you have canned, et cetera. So I think, again, learn this lesson over those years, is that improving on what you've already got is generally a faster path to not just return on investment, but return on effort than investing in a new thing. And so, that's just, I think, good hygiene generally to do that kind of a look.
Wise advice.
Great. All right. I'm feeling good.
2 for 2. You're 2 for 2 so
2 for 2. All right. Well, geez, now the pressure's on. So now I'm on to my stop. I guess in a way, this is a layup given your audience, but it's to stop starving your digital team for resources. Now, don't mishear me. Digital teams can be overbuilt. And if you gave me my preference, do I want a digital team with too many people or too few? I'm actually would take too few, right? Because I just find the inefficiencies and the amount of make work that happens when you have too many hands is incredibly debilitating. But I think, and this is probably where most of the listeners are, it's far more common for companies to skimp in this area, which is, you just have to scratch your head. I mean, I get why it happens, but you have to scratch your head given that this being digital, is typically the source of most, in some cases, all of the growth that the company may be experiencing. It can often be the source of most of the new customers coming into the brand or retailer. And then obviously with COVID, in some cases, it, at least for a while, was, the entire...
it's the whole game.
It was the whole game. So kind of like my first start, hopeful that this will allow companies to go, oh my gosh, we had, Jill, Bill, and Phil, basically responsible for 100% of the company's revenues for the past, 12 weeks or whatever it's been. Wow, maybe we should, augment. I think in particular, it's getting doers in. So folks who can actually put their hands on the dials versus generate PowerPoint and sit in meetings. People who know how to manage search campaigns, how to run A/B tests, how to work with affiliate recruitment and incentives, and all the things that actually move the business forward. That's the place that's often most starved. So stop doing that.
Well, you're a triple threat with the perfect trifecta of great information. Let's talk about what you're speaking. You're speaking at CommerceNext coming up, the virtual summit on the 28th and 29th of July. What are you going to be doing and talking about?
So maybe this is the best news people will hear on this, is that I'm just the moderator, which is great. Because anyone who listened to the prior one will hear I can certainly talk. And I think what's good about me in a moderating role is I'm there to facilitate and draw insights out of the panelists, which is what my focus will be. Right. But we're actually, it's very relevant to what we just talked about. And we're going to be, well, first on the panel, got a great mix of companies, both omni-channel retailers or really lifestyle brands like Vera Bradley, Techstyle, which many of your listeners I'm sure know, or at least know some of their individual vertical brands. Got a really interesting solution provider, Snaps.io, which is in the conversational AI space. Think about automation around customer service, for example, something that I think a lot of companies are probably going to be taking a harder look at, post-COVID. And then Madison Reed, which is I think a really cool up and coming brand in the hair care space. So nice mix of people. I know some of these folks personally, and they're very smart and very experienced and have great points of view. And what we're going to be looking at is kind of, we've seen this, pick your time frame. Some people say it's a 5-year leap forward. Some people say it's 10 in terms of the digital adoption curve among consumers.
The great acceleration as it's being called, right?
Yeah, that's a great way to say it. And I use that word digital deliberately because it isn't just the e-commerce component. Absolutely, we've seen penetration rates of things like grocery go through the roof,
skyrocket. Yeah,
but we're also seeing the adoption of digital more broadly and what consumers are comfortable doing. Right? People just pop up a Zoom call now, not just for work, and I know we're all maybe a little sick of that, but certainly many people are using it socially, or things that might have been a telephone call now have moved to Zoom almost as, when I say Zoom, I mean, video interactions.
Sure.
Versus phone. And so you've seen this accelerated adoption of digital ways of how people are interacting both with one another and with companies. We talked earlier about that video, how-to video. I think those things are going to have a lot more adoption. People are just going to, most of the folks on I'm sure listening to this already had sort of a knee-jerk instinctual reach for their phone or their laptop or whatever when they needed something. But I think that pool of people that do that now is much broader. So what the panel is going to be talking about is, that tide's gone way up the beach. It'll fall back in some places, but not all the way back to where it was. That, like you said, the great acceleration. And then I think interestingly too, we've had some places where there are going to be these wholly new behaviors and activities. And how do companies that maybe were already just running fast to try and keep up with the customer pre-COVID, if she has indeed jumped forward 5 or 10 years, boy, we're going to have to run really, really fast. Not just in a negative sense of avoiding the downsides of that, but also it creates some really interesting opportunities where companies can embrace that great acceleration, as I'm stealing that phrase from you, obviously. So I like
that's a Carl Boutet phrase. I stole it from him, so I borrowed it from Carl Boutet, great Canadian strategist. So shout out to my friend Carl.
Shouts to Carl Boutet. That's awesome. All right, I probably used up too much time, so maybe I should leave it at that.
Well, listen, your timing was perfect, actually. This is such a great insight into what you will be talking about. I'm sure we will all look forward to tuning in. I'll be there for sure in the virtual Commerce Next coming up towards the end of the month. So until then, until I see you on my screen and one day, hopefully soon, see you in person, it's been great chatting with you. And thanks for joining me on The Voice of Retail.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
Laura, welcome back to the Voice of Retail podcast. How are you?
I'm excellent. Thank you so much for having me.
Well, it's great to hear your voice again. It's good. It's all good. And I wish, you and I met in January at the NRF Big Show. So it's such a treat to be able to chat with you again and catch up again. For the folks who didn't have the chance to listen to that podcast episode, and I'd encourage everybody to page back to late January. Tell us a little bit about yourself, your journey, and what you do and the company you work for.
Sure. Hi, thanks. I'm glad to do that. So my journey, I have been building Techstyle for now almost 8 years, a little over 8 years, actually. So Techstyle is a portfolio of digital brands, including Fabletics, Just Fab, Shoedazzle, Fab Kids, and most recently a partnership we did with Rihanna for lingerie, which is Savage X Fenty. So I've been working with Adam and Dawn, the co-founders of that business, since Fab Kids was acquired back in 2013. I was on the founding team of Fab Kids, and we joined the Techstyle family back in January of 2013. And since then, I've done just about all the things you can imagine, including launching the Fabletics brand once upon a time, running advertising across all of the portfolio of brands. So really the growth engine for our business. And currently for the last year, it's just been a year and in a few days, I'm running the 3 original brands, Just Fab, Shoedazzle, and Fab Kids end to end. So we're we're hitting this year the 10-year anniversary for Just Fab. And it really is not only an anniversary and a birthday, but also a rebirth moment. So really excited about what these fashion brands are bringing to the world.
Well, you and I were talking off mic about what a beginning to the year it has been, from supply chain challenges earlier in the year to what is just a phenomenal, great acceleration for good or ill in some directions. So, based on what you've observed and experienced over the past couple of months, what you've looked at and been part of in retail, what do you anticipate retail looks like in the COVID era? And I'm going to frame this in give me 2 starts and 1 stop in terms of advice you would give to retailers listening. Stop doing these 2 things, again, based on what you've been experiencing, and start doing this 1 thing. And tell me a little bit about that. How do you conceptualize this experience that you're going through?
So start, and hopefully this isn't truly a new thing, but something that is an evergreen pursuit. But start putting yourself in the mindset of the customer. Make sure that what you're trying to offer and how you're choosing to talk about it is in keeping with the times and in keeping with what she needs. So start being really obsessed with making sure that you're resonant with the moment. That's 1 start. I would also say start, if you're not already really dialed into digital experiences, start that. And we've always been digital brands, but have been even more amped up on all surfaces. So when you think about the website, social media, both organic earned media as well as paid advertising, really, really thinking about end-to-end digital experiences, connecting the dots between these different surfaces, offering a little smile and a wink and a nod to what's happening, and also offering great value and easy experiences, easy shopping experiences. Digital matters more than ever now. We know that when you can't go to the mall, it's the only option for shopping, but it always has been an opportunity to really just reinvent the customer experience with a great end-to-end digital experience. So start getting serious about that, deadly serious about that if you're not already there. And stop, I would say, stop thinking the world is the same. It's not. Things change. We don't know precisely what comes next, but if we've learned anything in the last 100-ish days, it's that those who can be flexible and innovate and move with the times are the ones who will win. So stop pretending it's February. We're in a new world now.
That's such a great point. I had a long discussion on the podcast with Roger Martin, retail strategist, a couple of months ago, and he's actually putting out a book in the fall and talking about efficiency. And it's kind of a lifelong pursuit for him. He said, listen, at this point, we can't plan. In other words, strategy is going to be about making bets because you have no data to go by in the future. You can't, we are all used to in retail planning plus or minus a couple of %, and we have some sense of continuity or predictability. But he said, listen, you're going to have to, not like going to Vegas and make bets, but you're going to have to start thinking strategically in ways that you can't, base it on any of the numbers. I mean, you've got such great experience in what you do, yet I'm sure you've seen, numbers that you probably questioned on the spreadsheet about growth and all these things. And so what you just said is really, I think, important. Is, in other words, it feels to me like retailers are going to prioritize being nimble rather than being planned out, precise and planned out a year ahead, because it's just so hard to do that.
I happen to think that nimbleness wins the day, and it's been ever thus. So I don't think that's truly a new idea, but I think it's an increasingly important one when the world is as volatile as it has been in the last several months. So I think, anything you can do to reorient an organization toward really embracing and living a test and learn environment is definitely a muscle that needs to be built right now, and an investment that will pay off.
And in the same vein, I've talked to merchants who have said, as they look at their assortment, they're looking at it as thinner rather than larger. In other words, kind of consolidating some perhaps of the more thinly traded or thinly purchased styles or colorways or whatever, just because there's more reliability, if I can put it that way, in a more narrow assortment. How are you thinking about the assortment that you offer? You're in a very different place
Sure.
in in that you've got multiple brands with, some are home delivered and some are just, fashion celebrity brands. Is that the way you're conceptualizing, given what you know today?
Sure. It's interesting because this quarantine moment is happening in the midst of a pretty deep surgical reignite process we have going on across the three brands that are meeting right now. So a lot of the orientation towards merchandising is really about very much what we were saying a moment ago. It's about getting tighter, moving towards more of a chase mentality, being able to test and learn at small quantities, see what resonates, and build out depth in the things that truly are working. That's easier said than done in retail. There are long lead times for many things, but I think that building the supply chain and ops excellence muscle around responsiveness matters. And I think you have to read the tea leaves a little bit too. What we've seen in the summer is that the types of fashion people are interested in are things that fit really well to a shelter-in-place lifestyle. So it's less about going out style, and more about little treats for self and things that make her feel put together even when she's at home. And so being mindful of that and giving her those things is important. Making sure you're going to make some mistakes whenever we buy inventory in advance. It's always a bet. So being really thoughtful also about the way you're working through promotions, to help work through and ease out, some of the changes. If heeled sandals, for example, are in less demand suddenly because she's going out a little bit less, we might need to promote those things a little more, convert those things to cash, and keep it moving and keep ever in pursuit of giving her what she wants. And then, of course, there's fun things, call it fun if you will. There's things that are new categories that we never knew we wanted to sell. Suddenly we're selling a lot of masks, for example,
right.
Which never were there. So another,
of course,
another example of, it's brand new, and the people who can move fast and fill a need are the ones who will win the wallet share for categories like that.
Yeah, as I mentioned last time you and I, or the first time we met, last time we saw each other, you were on a stage at NRF and you were talking about influencers. It was a great panel, and I wondered what you're going to be talking about in CommerceNext coming up on the 28th and 29th. I believe you're on a panel. What are you going to be talking about? What are you bringing to the CommerceNext venue?
I'm excited to join this panel. No, I really I have been a friend of the crew that puts together this conference for a little while now. I spoke with them last summer as well. And looking forward this year to talk about the very topic that we've been hitting on a little bit, which is what's next with digital. How important is it for businesses to really be dialed into digital experiences? So excited to hear what some colleagues have to say about that and share my thoughts and experience based on our work at Techstyle as well.
All right. Well, most excellent. If folks want to learn a little bit about you in advance, other than going to the CommerceNext site, LinkedIn, and what's your URL so they can get to know Techstyle a little better?
Sure. So the Techstyle website gives a little bit of information about the corporate portfolio. If you want to learn more about our brands, you can look up any of them: Fabletics, Just Fab, Fab Kids, Shoe Dazzle, and Savage X Fenty. If you're looking for me, I am on LinkedIn, Laura Joukovski, Joukov, S as in Sam, Ki.
Well, fantastic. Well, Laura, thanks for jumping on and being my guest on The Voice of Retail. It's wonderful to hear your voice again, and I look forward to, in the future, seeing you in person. And thanks again for joining me, and have a safe rest of your summer, and I wish you much continued success.
And to the same to you. Appreciate you having me, and thanks for always being out there creating content for the rest of us to learn together. Appreciate that, and happy to contribute in this moment.
Well, thanks to Scott, Veronika, Rob, and Laura for being my guests on this special bonus episode, Part 1. Be sure and visit CommerceNext.com and register for the CommerceNext Virtual Summit taking place on July 28th and 29th. Tune in each and every week as I interview the most interesting people in retail. You can subscribe to The Voice of Retail on Apple, Spotify, or your favorite podcast platform. Please rate and review, and be sure to recommend to a friend or colleague in the retail industry. I'm Michael LeBlanc, founder and president of Emmy LeBlanc Company, Inc. You can learn more about me on www.emmyleblanc.co or, of course, on LinkedIn. Until next time, have a safe week.